Hello everyone, welcome back to Aurorin Expounded, the series where I go into the world building and extra lore that we can't get into during the actual streams as to not slow down the episodes. In this episode, we'll be delving into something that my players at my home game have been getting into, but we haven't really gotten into full depth into in a D&D stream quite yet because my players are not high enough level to engage with this, but it has been hinted at. And the topic for today is the Precursors, specifically the Precursor Ruins. But before we can get into the ruins, we need to go over a little bit of basic history of what is currently known about the Precursors. Now, within the context of the world of Aurorin, not much is currently known about the whereabouts of the Precursors or what happened to them. But it is known that they are the oldest race that predates all other mortal races on the planet. Scholars, mainly hailing from the Explorers Guild, theorize that the Precursors have either gone extinct or have permanently left the material plane, leaving behind very trace elements of their existence. There are also theories that the Precursors predate the arrival of the gods. And it wasn't until recent years that that theory has been confirmed by scholars, roughly about 10 years before the events of the Paragon Stream. Pretty much all their cities have turned to dust and all their records are lost, and any language that is discovered is indecipherable even by magical means. What is known about the Precursors is that they were tall and their skin was of a marbled texture, something akin to stone. They came in many shapes and colors and had technologies far superior beyond what is currently available to the mortal world. Roughly about 400 years before the time of the Paragon, there was a city discovered in the land that borders Hirashal and Alabast. However, that city was almost completely buried, and before they could fully excavate it, all the scholars were forced out due to the events of the First Surge, turning that entire area into the Blighted Lands. Due to the extreme danger surrounding it, it has remained untouched thus far, ever since it was first discovered, but has been given the nickname Remnant. So, with ancient history, indecipherable languages, and the only reference unable to be reached, how does one go about studying the Precursors? Well, that's where the Precursor Ruins come in. Precursor Ruins are strange structures that spontaneously materialize at random points around the planet's surface. These structures absorb any emotions and energies and somewhat mimics the landscape around it, forming it into a very small pocket plane. So one might find this pocket plane as a strange structure that seems very old, but definitely has not existed there the entire time, with the entrance to it being an opaque, glowing gateway. Once somebody steps through the gateway, there is no going back until the trial is completed. Precursor Ruins are named so, not because they are the ruins themselves, but completing the trial within reveals the ruins for further study. Once you enter the pocket plane, there is no telling what you may encounter. These ruins are designed to be brutal challenges for those brave enough to take them on, with a promise of a great reward at the end. Most of these places come in multiple floors. Once you clear one floor, you are teleported back to the material plane and a section of the real ruins are revealed. And that is usually where the scholars come in to take notes and study, find the artwork, the murals, and copy down what they find in an attempt to decipher what they see. After a short time, the gateway to the second area of the Precursor Ruin will open up to be able to be challenged. These pocket planes do take inspiration from the material plane that surrounds it. For example, up here in Atheus, a Precursor Ruin was cleared. This particular Precursor Ruin, located within the Shimmerpine Forest within Atheus, was beneath a Lich's domain. As a result, when the adventuring party went through to clear the dungeon was full of undead and necrotic energies to fill its traps and fulfill the role of the challenge. In this instance, how this Precursor Ruin functioned is the adventuring party went in and cleared the first floor. Then they were spat back out into the material plane, and the area that they were in dissolved into a small chapel area full of murals and writings and what the scholars that were there at the time assumed to be Holy Scripture. In the back of the chapel, the gateway to the second area of the ruin was discovered. Upon the clearing of the second area, the back end of the chapel was revealed with more information and more altars and objects of worship. And finally, once the third and final floor of the Precursor Ruin was cleared, the actual area dissolved into the catacombs just beneath the chapel. And this allowed the scholars to infer burial practices that the precursors used during their time. However, only after a short time of the Precursor Ruins being cleared, the area around the cleared ruins becomes unstable, and eventually that chapel was whisked away back to wherever it came from, leaving the material plane seemingly for good. And this is another reason why Precursor Ruins are so hard to research, because even if you manage to clear them, they only exist for a short while before being whisked away forever. At the time of making this video, only 2 groups have successfully cleared a Precursor Ruin, which would be a group known as the Misfortunes, located within Atheus, and that would belong to my group of players in our home game, and the other group being the Solemn Vow, which we saw the leader of at the end of one of the episodes in our Paragon stream, coming to check out the Paragon. Now, as for the rewards at the end, they can be incredibly powerful. However, sometimes they are much more scholarly in nature. But the last 2 that were discovered were more powerful in nature. In Atheus, the Misfortunes were granted with a stone with powerful resurrection capabilities, which brought back one of the party members full flesh and blood, as well as his old thieving crew, which we will get into that story in another series later. And as for the Solemn Vow and Alabast, the leader of the group was rewarded with a sword known as the Harbinger of the Sun. Not many people know how it functions, but maybe we'll see later. But who makes these ruins, and why do they offer rewards, and who puts those rewards there? Well, that'll bring us to our next point. Whenever a Precursor Ruin is completely cleared, those who participate in the clearing have several experiences. The first thing they all witness is a vision. They see impossible cities. They see living precursors, which is how they know that they were multicolored with marbled skin, almost akin to stone. Technologies beyond their comprehension. They almost seem to witness this from the view of somebody's eyes. These seem to be memories of somebody. And going over every single cleared Precursor Ruin and those who cleared them all, they seem to be shared memories of one individual person. After the vision, all parties seem to hear a voice, the voice of an old man who seems to be congratulating them on what they've accomplished. While this voice has yet to ever give a response, it does seem aware of current events going on around them. It is a widely accepted theory that this voice is also the person who these memories and visions belong to. Over countless years after these visions have been being discovered and this voice heard, it has been theorized that this man makes all of the Precursor Ruins and thus has been nicknamed the Architect. Some people believe that the Architect places these Precursor Ruins around the world as a sick, twisted game to see people struggle and die within its clutches. Others theorize that the Architect places these as trials to see if the mortal races are worthy to join the Precursors in wherever they have gone. And yet another theory, and perhaps the most terrifying, is that the Architect may be preparing the mortal world for something that is to come, making sure that they are strong enough. But regardless of intention, these ruins are treasure troves of magic, history, and knowledge, should anybody be up to the challenge that lies before them. Thank you all for watching another episode of Aurorin Expounded. We'll be getting into much greater detail as we kind of narrow things down into different topics and everything, but kind of want to start this series off by giving an overview of the more broad things, almost like a starter guide of what you need to know before going into the world of Aurorin, some things that would be common knowledge all over the world. The specific events around the Precursor Ruin in Atheus cleared by the players at my home game, I'll be getting into that in a different series where I'll be going over. Me and those players have nicknamed that campaign Blood Money, which is pretty fitting given the story that is currently being told over there. And even though that game takes place about 10 years before the Paragon stream, I do have to be pretty vague with it because that game is also still ongoing. And I also still don't want to give too much away because I don't want to have to railroad my players into a story. But that's going to be a story for another time. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you once again to our Patreon supporter D4Fan, and we will see you all in the next video. Thank you and goodbye.